What's up, everybody? Merry Christmas. I want to start off by saying in recent years, a lot has been uncovered about the true origins of Christmas and how what we have today is an amalgamation of a lot of different cultures that have all melded together and have brought their ideas of wintertide or New Year's celebrations to produce what we have as a modern Christmas. But whatever reason you celebrate Christmas for, if it's for the birth of Christ, then that's why you're celebrating it. So just because you're learning that, parts of the tradition are Germanic, parts of it go back to old school Roman debauchery, don't let that ruin Christmas for you. You're celebrating it for whatever reason you're celebrating it for. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody knows Santa Claus has nothing to do with the birth of Christ. And if that's why you and your family are celebrating Christmas, then don't let any new outside information interfere with that. You're still doing it for your reasons. So I just wanted to start off with that because I don't want anybody saying, oh, well, I've been lied to about Christmas. Well, you were lied to about Santa Claus too. Or at least why his coat's red. Which is an interesting story. So Santa Claus is supposed to be based off of St. Nicholas, a 4th century Greek bishop. And just as a side note, anybody interested in the timeline gap, look into the saints because you'll find that all of the saints of the East are from, 1 AD to 500 AD, and then all of them from the West are from the 10th century up to the 1500s. And you'll basically find this timeline gap with everything that you study from between the East and Western traditions. But our modern idea of jolly old Saint Nick actually comes from the 1920s and Coca-Cola advertisements. And this is back when Coca-Cola actually had coca in it. And there wasn't even any negative stigma attached to that. I mean, Sigmund Freud liked his cocaine. This idea of Santa was the brainchild of Hayden Sundblom, an American artist of Swedish and Finnish descent. And he didn't just invent this character out of thin air. He just melded Swedish and Finnish oral tradition into artwork. Now, I heard about all of this a few years ago, and I can't confirm whether this is fact or not, but it kind of makes too much sense to not be fact. It would seem that the majority of our Christmas traditions are based off of mushrooms. Amanita muscaria, to be exact. This is the Alice in Wonderland mushroom, and I have had an experience with it before, and out of all the delics I've done, this was by far the most intense, and I don't recommend it to anybody. I seriously don't. It was very, very rough getting to where I went, and I might have to tell you about that some other time. But check out how many coincidences we have here. Why do we cut down cedar trees and bring them inside and decorate them up with all these pretty little bells and whistles? This is kind of what we're used to seeing today, but a little more traditional would look like this. See all the pretty little red things on the tree? So here's something that I wish I had known when I tried Amanita muscaria is you're supposed to dry it thoroughly before consuming. Otherwise, it will give you really bad muscle spasms and a couple other things. But if you dry them out, then the chemicals that are in there that give you all the problems, and you're left with the muscimol, I think it's called, that gives you the experience. Also, Amanita muscaria is generally found in coniferous type forest. So all of those pretty little Christmas decorations we have are an homage to mushrooms. And having them hanging on a tree and drying out will give you a much better, cleaner experience. Why is Santa Claus's coat red? Well, because the village shaman has been out picking all of these mushrooms out in the wood and it stains his clothes red, so that's why the red coat. What about Santa Claus coming down the chimney? That one always seemed weird to me, and I'm sure it did to a lot of people. Why would he come down on the fire? And a quick story, I had a friend in high school whose dad one Christmas took a big black boot and threw it in the fire. And when they woke up Christmas morning, he said Santa Claus didn't make it. And yes, unfortunately, he was a little messed up in the head. But yeah, Santa Claus coming down the chimney. There couldn't be a practical explanation for this, could there? Well, some Germanic and Scandinavian peoples lived in yurts. And in the middle of winter, these would be completely covered in snow. And at the top center of those is an opening for the smoke of the fire to leave, just like a teepee. So when the village shaman came around to spread all of this Christmas cheer, the only way to get into the house was through the opening in the roof to let the smoke out. So the whole idea of Santa Claus coming down through the chimney is the only way a shaman could have got into the house in the dead of winter. What about the flying reindeer? And by the way, if there's any question of the origins of all of this, where do reindeer live? You don't find too many of these in the Middle East or the Mediterranean. So all of this is obviously a northern tradition. But Santa and his flying reindeer. Well, I'm going to gross some people out here, but sometimes the shaman himself would ingest all of the Amanita muscaria and use his own body as a filter to filter out all of the bad stuff that makes for the unpleasant side of things. But the active ingredient there can pass through the human body just fine. So sometimes, and especially if people were ready to get the party started and not wait for the mushrooms to dry out, then the shaman would consume them, and then the other people would consume his urine. But whether this was from the shaman or the people that had dried them out, anybody that goes outside and pees on the ground, well, the reindeer love the salt in the urine. So they would go lick up all the yellow snow, and inside of it is the muscimol, the active ingredient, and they'd be tripping balls and then jumping all over the place, and there's your flying reindeer. So, like I said, it kind of all makes a little too much sense to not be true, right? You've got the old Greek Christian tradition of St. Nicholas and, giving presents to kids that when Christianity was introduced into Germanic tribes, well, they had their traditions too, and you really find this with a lot of things in history. It almost seems like cultures that passed on history through oral traditions stuck to more truth than cultures that adopted writing, because with writing, especially with the Catholic Church, there was a long time where only the priests spoke Latin and everything was written in Latin. And if they decide to change a few things here and there, nobody's the wiser. But passing it down through oral tradition like Hindu culture and the Mahabharata, kids will learn that whole book word for word. And if there's any question who's smarter, people 1,000 years ago or today, they used to memorize this whole book, by the time they were teenagers. And I just watched a scary video last night of how we're developing an AI god and dumbing ourselves down, and the AI god will rule over us all the way through this next Kali Yuga. There's a lot that can be said about that, but I'll keep with the Christmas theme. Even just looking at the old Odin drawings, you can see kind of a Proto-Santa character there. Odin, the All-Father, and Father Time. Basically, when you have similar mythical characters, then they all get morphed into the same story. Anyway, I found all this really interesting. Thought I'd pass it along. But I'll tell you, I'm spending Christmas with a lot of people that like their Christmas paradigm, and so I'm not bringing this up to them, and you probably shouldn't either if they're into what they're into, It really is true. A lot of people just can't handle the truth. You get so far with them and they just start shutting down. So that's fine. If they're happier with where they're at now than if you tried to explain this to them, then don't bother. Because honestly, with the direction the world's heading right now and the dumbing down of everybody, we need all of the traditions and common ground to stand on that we can get. There's a whole system trying to divide everybody on every single little level. And the only ones that will ever stop them from succeeding in that task is us staying unified. So, Merry Christmas, everybody. I hope you have a good one. I'll talk to you soon. Static out.